This dog's discovery changed his owner's life forever. Usually, animals in general and especially dogs have very strong instincts. And when they want to communicate something important to someone, they can find the most unimaginable ways to do it. That's exactly what happened in this true story that will send shivers down your spine. George Miller was a bachelor, leaving his family to live on his own, initially for studies and then for work. As it happens with many, George felt alone rather quickly and decided he needed a companion immediately. He came up with a brilliant idea. George decided that he needed an animal companion more than a human one at this point in his life. Thus, he decided to adopt a beautiful, young puppy. His new friend would be named Crosby, and the duo were an instant match. The two friends immediately had a true connection. Crosby seemed to be a friendly and playful dog, always waiting patiently for George to return home and have fun together. However, this seemingly perfect situation started to change gradually. Before his adoption by George, Crosby lived in a rural area. But his social and goofy personality meant that he preferred living in a more active environment. Yet, despite the initial happiness he felt, his behavior started to change after some time. George's neighbors had pets of their own, a cat and a dog. Our extroverted here, Crosby, immediately took a liking to them and soon started asking from George to take him to play with them, producing plenty of heartwarming images in the process. This happy friendship wasn't meant to last, however. Crosby's best friends passed away suddenly, one after the other. George felt for his companion, and seeing him sad and crying made him devastated. What could he do? Domesticated animals love their friends, just like humans do. That's what makes them such great companions to their owners. Crosby too felt affection for his friends and became evidently sad to see them pass away. That obviously led to serious problems. According to science, dogs can have feelings of sadness due to the loss of a loved friend, just like humans. It was clear that Crosby was struggling to get over the loss of his neighbor friends. George had initially thought that this was the reason for his unusual behavior, but he had no idea what had actually happened. By this point, George and Crosby had lived together for years. George was always accustomed to seeing Crosby greet him with immense joy as he was coming back home from work, eagerly waiting for his walk and playing around. George had noticed something different in Crosby's behavior though. One day, as George came back from work, he was shocked upon opening his apartment's door. Crosby was nowhere to be found. His mind, naturally, immediately jumped to negative thoughts. He knew something was off. Upon entering the house, George started calling Crosby by his name. Yet, he received no response. Worried, he rushed to the living room, where he saw a pretty unsettling image. George was shocked to see Crosby staring at the wall. While he was relieved his companion was fine, he couldn't help feeling scared. Why didn't Crosby answer to his name, and more importantly, why was he staring at a seemingly normal wall? Crosby seemed to be fine, yet George was worried about his health. Did he not respond to him because of hearing problems? This didn't seem to be the case, however. Crosby kept being unusually quiet and fixated to the wall. George examined the wall closely many times, yet he couldn't find anything unusual with it. Soon enough, Crosby went back to normal, and George finally felt relieved his companion was fine. It was then that he saw something that would send shivers down his spine. As George was struggling to fall asleep, he decided to get up in the middle of the night and go get a glass of water. And as he approached the living room, he saw Crosby staring at in total darkness. The image was so shocking to George that he had trouble breathing for a minute or two. What was Crosby doing? George immediately hugged and tried to comfort Crosby. In his mind though, he had already thought of a plan. He was going to get a camera and install it on the living room to see if his pet companion was able to see things that he himself could not. Instead, he was about to find something genuinely confusing. After installing the hidden camera, George waited for a few days to analyze the footage. Yet, what he found was most surprising to him. Crosby wasn't staring at the wall in the absence of George. He acted instead, as if nothing had happened. His behavior would change immediately once George entered the house. It was clear to him now. Since dogs can't speak, as we said before, they find extremely imaginative ways of communicating with humans. This was the case here. Crosby was obviously trying to signal that something was wrong with the wall. What could it be though? George was in for a life-changing discovery. George stormed to the living room to examine the wall. Crosby almost immediately followed him, barking happily as George was checking every inch of the wall with his hands. It was clear now that Crosby had managed to communicate his problem to his owner. Now, it was George's turn to find out what was hidden in this wall. George started hearing a very subtle odd noise coming from the wall. He thought he was going mad. He kept looking for possible hints at the wall when he found something was off in one particular spot. This was getting weird. George found out that there was a hole in this living room wall. As he put his ear next to it, he could hear something disturbing. He now had no choice but to move frantically and expand the hole. It was a matter of life and death. Apparently, behind the hole, the wall was partly hollow, and George had no difficulty sticking his arm into it. When he touched something soft and hairy, he thought it was a layer of insulation. Instead, the man had just touched a cat. His heart stopped for a few seconds. George had to be precise and save the kitten. Thankfully, the wall was so hollow that he had no problem taking the poor being out. He rushed to help it get clean, breathe properly and feed it. It's hard to imagine the joy he must have felt. Crosby, meanwhile, was ecstatic. After taking care of it, George took the kitten to a veterinarian to ensure it's healthy. Then, he thought to himself, he should try and find its mother or owner. He had no other choice, right? Despite writing online and asking his neighbors about it, there was just no way to find the kitten's mama. When he asked the local shelter, they told him that they couldn't take any more animals. He was left with only one choice. George had no other option other than adopting the cat. It made sense to him anyway. He would keep the kitten safe and happy while his pal Crosby would make a new furry friend. It was a win-win situation. George immediately bought the resources necessary to feed and protect the kitten, while also giving her a designated place to rest at night near Crosby's small house. They were bound to become friends after that. The two furry friends immediately started spending time playing together, much to the satisfaction of George, who now had two four-legged friends to keep him company as he was feeling alone, away from his family. Thinking about it though, he couldn't help but wonder at one thing. No one could tell how the kitten was stuck there exactly. But one thing was certain, Crosby finding a new friend, after the loss of his old ones, in this unbelievable fashion, was something out of a movie. Was it fate that led Crosby to this discovery? George thought to himself. The trio of friends continue living together happily, to this day. They always spend time together, playing and having walks. We can only feel gratitude for this young man's compassion that lead him to save and adopt this small kitten and provide a friend to his pal at the same time.